Have you ever heard something you weren't supposed to, and afterward, nothing felt quite the same? Sometimes it's just a slip of a word, a careless whisper, but the weight of it settles so deeply that even the walls of your home begin to echo with doubt. That's what happened to me last Thursday, standing in the kitchen with my hands sunk in dishwater, the soft hum of family voices in the next room. I heard Victor say, barely above a murmur, "She's better than her." He didn't know I was listening. He didn't know I'd catch those words and hold them so close they might burn me from the inside out. And he certainly didn't know I'd spend the rest of the night and the days that followed wondering, who was he talking about? And what did he really mean? I've always found comfort in the routines of home, the predictability of morning light slanting across our narrow kitchen window, the faint scent of coffee mingling with yesterday's toast. Our apartment is nothing special to look at, a squat red brick building wedged between a laundromat and a florist shop on a busy city street. But inside, it's alive with the clutter and warmth of family. The kitchen is the heart of it all, always humming with activity. A basket of overripe bananas on the counter, school permission slips magneted to the fridge, Mateo's soccer cleats kicked under the table, and Lucia's notebooks scattered like breadcrumbs along the path from her bedroom to the couch. Every morning, I rise before the sun, careful not to wake Victor as I slip from our bed and pad quietly through the hallway. I savor those first moments of silence, when the city is still, and the only sound is the gentle click of the coffee maker. I make lunches for Lucia and Mateo, turkey sandwiches, apple slices, notes scribbled on napkins in a handwriting that's grown softer and rounder over the years. I sweep up the crumbs from last night's dinner, wipe down counters sticky with forgotten jelly, and start a load of laundry before the day has even properly begun. Lucia is always the first to join me, shuffling in with her dark hair tangled around her face, headphones still draped around her neck. She's 16 now, all sharp elbows and quick wit, forever rolling her eyes at my reminders to eat breakfast, to bring a jacket, to be kind to her little brother. Some mornings, she sits at the table in silence, scrolling through her phone, a storm brewing just beneath her calm surface. Other days, she's all chatter, complaints about chemistry class, stories about her friends, or the latest injustice in her world. I listen, folding her words into my heart and tucking away pieces of her that she only lets me see at the edges of her day. Mateo is different. He bursts into the kitchen like a sunbeam, still young enough to seek out hugs before cereal. He's 9 and earnest, with eyes that search my face for reassurance, for answers to questions he's only just learning to ask. He clings to me in small ways, his hand slipping into mine as we cross the street, his whispered, "I love you, Mom," before bed, the way he still lets me smooth his hair before school. I know these days are numbered, and I try to savor each one, storing away the sweetness for the colder seasons of motherhood. Victor, my husband, is the last to appear each morning, trailing cologne and the crisp rustle of his suit jacket. He's an accountant, practical to the bone, his mind always ticking through numbers, deadlines, and the steady logic of his spreadsheets. He greets us with a quiet nod, a quick kiss on my cheek if he's in a good mood, and then he's off, briefcase in hand, already half absorbed by the day ahead. Sometimes I wonder if he sees me at all, or if I've become just another fixture in the landscape of his life, as reliable and unremarkable as the clock above the stove. Our days follow a rhythm: school, work, chores, dinner. The city outside pulses with noise and movement, but inside our apartment, time expands and contracts around the small dramas of family life. Lucia and Mateo bicker over who left the bathroom light on, over who gets the last slice of pizza, over whose turn it is to feed the cat. I referee quietly, smoothing tempers and redirecting energy, always trying to keep the peace. It's not glamorous work, but it's mine, and most days I find comfort in the doing. But lately, a heaviness has settled over our home, an invisible fog that makes everything feel just a little bit harder. Maybe it's Lucia's growing independence, or Victor's long hours at the office, or the way my own reflection seems to grow older and more tired by the week. Or maybe it's Marina, Victor's sister, who breezes into our apartment every few days with her perfect hair and expensive shoes, and that laugh that fills every corner of the room. She's younger than me by a few years, confident in a way I never learned to be, always ready with an opinion or a story that leaves everyone else in her shadow. Marina never misses a chance to point out the dust on my shelves, the stains on Mateo's shirt, the way Lucia's hair is never quite brushed. She's quick with advice, unasked for but delivered with a smile, and quicker still with comparisons. "Back when I was living in the city," she'll say, or, "You know, Elena, I always find it easier to just hire help." The others laugh, sometimes nervously, sometimes genuinely charmed. I try to smile too, to let her words slide off me, but they stick all the same. Then there's Tia Rosa, Victor's aunt, who visits every Sunday with a basket of pastries and a dozen stories about the old country. She's in her 70s, her hair silver and coiled in a tight bun, her eyes sharp as a hawk's. She believes in tradition, family dinners, respect for elders, the importance of a clean home and a full table. I admire her, even as I wilt a little under her gaze, always searching for signs that I'm living up to her standards. That night, the night I overheard Victor's words, we were all gathered around the dining table. The air was thick with the smell of garlic and roasted chicken, plates clattering as I served dinner, laughter and conversation rising and falling in waves. Marina was telling a story about her latest work trip, gesturing animatedly with her wine glass, while Lucia poked at her food and Mateo tried to sneak a piece of bread to the cat under the table. Victor sat quietly, listening, nodding at all the right moments, his expression unreadable. I moved between the kitchen and the table, refilling glasses, clearing plates, my body moving on autopilot even as my mind wandered. In the hallway, just out of sight, I paused to catch my breath, and that's when I heard Victor's voice, soft, almost apologetic, murmuring to Marina, "She's better than her." The words were swallowed quickly by the noise of the room, but they landed with a thud in my chest. Better than who? I wondered. Was he talking about me? About Marina? About someone else entirely? The question gnawed at me as I finished the dishes, as I tucked Mateo into bed, as I listened to Lucia's music drift through her closed door. I replayed the moment over and over, searching for clues in Victor's tone, Marina's laughter, the way the room had shifted in that instant. I wanted to believe he meant me, that he saw me, that in some small way I was better than whatever comparison he'd drawn. But a voice inside me whispered that I was wrong, that I'd never measure up, not to Marina, not to the image of the perfect wife and mother I'd built in my mind. That night, as I lay in bed beside Victor, listening to his steady breathing, I stared at the ceiling and let the doubts wash over me. I thought about all the ways I tried to hold our family together. The meals cooked, the clothes washed, the arguments soothed, the birthdays remembered. I thought about the sacrifices I'd made, the dreams I'd put aside, the ways I'd learned to swallow disappointment and smile anyway. I wondered if anyone noticed, if anyone cared, or if my efforts were just another part of the background noise of their lives. In the days that followed, the memory of Victor's words haunted me. I found myself watching him more closely, searching his face for signs of affection, of frustration, of anything that might reveal what he truly felt. I noticed the way he smiled at Marina's jokes, the way he listened when she talked about her job, the way he seemed lighter in her presence. I tried to tell myself I was imagining things, that I was being unfair, but the seed of insecurity had taken root. Marina's visits became more frequent, her presence filling our small apartment like a perfume that lingered long after she'd gone. She brought gifts for Lucia, lip glosses, novels, advice on boys, and for Mateo, new soccer balls and promises of tickets to games. She sat with Victor on the couch, laughing over old family stories, her hand resting lightly on his arm. I told myself it was innocent, that I was being foolish, but I couldn't help feeling like an outsider in my own home. Lucia noticed too. One afternoon, as I folded laundry in her room, she flopped onto her bed and sighed. "Why does Dad always listen to Aunt Marina, but never to you?" she asked, her voice small and uncertain. I shrugged, not trusting myself to answer, and she rolled onto her side, staring at the wall. "Sometimes I feel like I'm invisible," she whispered, and I reached out to smooth her hair, wishing I had the right words to make her feel seen. Mateo, at least, was still mine. He followed me from room to room, his questions endless, his faith in me unwavering. "You're the best mom," he told me one night as I tucked him in, his arms tight around my neck. I held him a little longer than usual, letting his words settle in the space where doubt had grown. Even Tia Rosa, for all her sternness, seemed to sense the shift in the air. She lingered in the kitchen after Sunday lunch, watching me wash dishes, her hands folded neatly in her lap. "Family is hard work, Elena," she said quietly, her voice gentler than I'd ever heard it. "Sometimes, the hardest work is the work nobody sees." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak, and she patted my shoulder before slipping out the door. Through it all, I kept moving, packing lunches, scrubbing floors, paying bills, ironing Victor's shirts, listening to Lucia's worries, cheering at Mateo's soccer games. I tried to hold on to the small joys, the way the light danced across the living room in the late afternoon, the sound of Lucia's laughter when she forgot to be angry, the feel of Mateo's hand in mine. But the ache of Victor's words lingered, a constant reminder that I might never be enough. I wanted to confront him, to ask what he meant, to demand the truth, but I was afraid of what I might hear, afraid of what it would mean for our family, afraid that the fragile peace I'd built would shatter under the weight of honesty. Instead, I buried my questions beneath the routines of daily life, hoping they might dissolve with time. Still, each night, as I turned off the lights and listened to the quiet breathing of my family, I wondered, is it possible to be seen, truly seen, by the people you love? Or are mothers meant to live in the shadows, their sacrifices invisible, their love taken for granted? I didn't have an answer. All I knew was that I would keep trying, keep loving, keep hoping that one day, someone, maybe even Victor, would look at me and see all that I was, and all that I had given. The city outside our window never sleeps, its lights flickering like distant stars. Inside, our family moves through the days, sometimes close, sometimes apart, bound together by the invisible threads of shared history, silent promises, and the hope that, in the end, love will be enough. That night, after everyone had gone to bed and the lights in the apartment had faded to a hush of orange from the street lamps, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The city's distant traffic seemed gentler than the words that kept circling in my mind. She's better than her. Every syllable felt like a stone in my chest. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, that maybe I'd misunderstood, but Victor's tone, soft, almost apologetic, kept replaying. I thought of the way Marina had laughed at the dinner table, her voice spilling over everyone else's, and how Victor's eyes seemed to linger on her stories, his smile warmer, more familiar. By morning, the apartment buzzed with the usual weekday chaos, Lucia slamming doors because she couldn't find her favorite sweater, Mateo trailing behind me with his backpack half-zipped, and Victor moving through the kitchen with his customary silence. I watched him pour his coffee, his profile outlined against the window. For a moment, I almost asked him, "What did you mean last night?" But the words crumbled on my tongue. Instead, I handed him his thermos and managed a tired smile. "You have everything you need?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. He nodded, barely meeting my eyes. "Thanks, Lena." Then he was gone, briefcase in hand, the familiar click of the door sealing the question between us. After the kids left for school, I moved through the motions of my morning, wiping down counters, folding laundry, making a shopping list. My reflection in the hallway mirror looked older than I remembered, hair pulled back, shadows under my eyes deeper than I liked. I thought about Marina, how she always seemed so put together, her lipstick never smudged, her clothes crisp even by afternoon. She'd come by later that day, she always did on Thursdays, dropping in with her shopping bags and stories from her job at the design firm. I wondered if Victor had meant her when he said, "She's better." Maybe it was obvious. Marina, with her quick wit and easy confidence, always drew attention when she entered the room. She was Victor's sister, but sometimes it felt like she belonged more in this family than I did. I tried to shake the thought off. There was too much to do. Groceries to buy, bills to sort, a dinner to plan. By noon, I was standing in the produce aisle at the corner market, fingers brushing over the smooth skins of tomatoes, the sharp scent of cilantro rising from my basket. I wondered if dinner was the right moment to try, again, to bridge the gap with Victor. Maybe a special meal, something from when we first got married, would remind him of us before life became so crowded and complicated. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Lucia, her message short. "Can you pick me up after practice? Dad said he's busy." I replied quickly, telling her, of course, and felt a familiar ache settle in my chest. Lucia had become quieter lately, her moods shifting like the weather. I worried she felt overlooked, sandwiched between Victor's silences and my own attempts to keep everything from falling apart. I thought about our last conversation, a week ago, in her room, when she said she missed how things used to be. "You and Dad used to laugh more," she'd said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Now it's like you're both just tired." With the groceries loaded into the trunk, I sat in the driver's seat for a moment, letting myself breathe. The radio played a song we used to dance to in the kitchen, back when the kids were little and Victor would pull me into his arms, spinning me until we were both out of breath. I missed that version of us, light, unburdened. Sometimes I wondered if he missed it too, or if he'd found it somewhere else, in the easy laughter of someone like Marina. When I got home, the apartment felt too quiet. I put the food away, started on the sauce for dinner, and let my thoughts wander. Marina arrived just after 3, her heels clicking on the tiles, her perfume trailing behind her. She swept into the kitchen, dropping her bags on the table, her voice bright. "Oh, Elena, you always make this place smell so good. I wish I had your patience with cooking, but you know me. Takeout queen." She laughed, tossing her hair, and I forced a smile, stirring the pot with more force than necessary. She told me about her latest project, a lobby she was redesigning for a new hotel downtown. The client said I have a real talent for bringing a room to life, she said, flashing her perfect teeth. You should come see it sometime. Maybe bring Victor? He always appreciates good design. I caught the way she said his name, the casual intimacy, and wondered if I was imagining things, or maybe I was just seeing what I feared most. Later, as she helped me set the table, she glanced at the framed photograph of Victor and me on our wedding day. You were so young, she said, her tone unreadable. I remember thinking how brave you were, marrying into this crazy family. She set down the forks with a soft clatter, her eyes meeting mine for a moment. Sometimes I wish I had your steadiness, Elena. You hold everything together. Her words surprised me. For a second, I saw past the gloss and confidence, a flicker of something softer. But then her phone buzzed and she was off again, her laughter echoing down the hall as she answered a call. Lucia came home a little later, dropping her backpack by the door with a sigh. She hovered by the kitchen entrance, watching Marina's shadow disappear into the spare room. She's always here, Lucia said quietly, her eyes searching mine. Sometimes I think Dad likes her more than us. She bit her lip, waiting to see if I'd contradict her, but I couldn't find the right words. I knelt by her, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. You know your father loves you, I said, hoping my voice sounded more certain than I felt. She shrugged, letting me pull her into a hug, and for a moment we just stayed there, holding on. Dinner that night was meant to be special. Victor's favorite, arroz con pollo, the recipe I learned from his mother when we were first married. I set the table with our good plates, lit a candle even though it was just the four of us. When Victor came home, he looked tired, distracted, barely noticing the effort. Marina joined us, her stories filling the spaces between bites, and Tia Rosa called halfway through, her voice booming through the speakerphone, reminding us to come to her house on Sunday for lunch. I watched Victor through the flicker of candlelight, searching his face for a sign, a smile, a touch, anything that would tell me we were okay. Instead, he listened to Marina, nodding at her stories, laughing in that easy way he rarely did with me these days. I reached for his hand under the table, but he was already standing, clearing his plate. Long day, he said, pressing a kiss to my forehead, his lips barely grazing my skin. After the kitchen was cleaned and the kids were in bed, I sat on the couch, the quiet pressing in around me. I tried to remember the last time Victor and I had talked, really talked, about anything other than schedules or bills. The distance between us felt wider than ever. The next afternoon, I met my friend Julia at the little cafe on Maple Street, the one with the blue awning and the old piano in the corner. It was a rare treat, an hour just for me. Julia listened as I told her about the dinner, about Victor's words, about Marina. Have you talked to him about it? She asked gently, stirring her tea. I shook my head. I don't know how. What if I'm just being paranoid? Maybe I'm reading too much into things. Julia reached across the table, squeezing my hand. You deserve to know how he feels, Elena. You deserve to feel seen. Her words echoed in my mind all the way home. That evening, as I folded laundry in the living room, Lucia sat beside me, picking at the edge of a pillowcase. Mom, do you ever feel like you're invisible? She asked, her voice so soft I almost missed it. I swallowed, folding a towel with trembling hands. Sometimes, I admitted, but I try to remember that the people who matter do see me, even if they don't always say it. She nodded, and for a moment I saw myself in her, the same longing for approval, the same fear of being overlooked. Later, when Victor came home, I tried again, suggesting we go out for coffee, just the two of us, like we used to. He hesitated, glancing at his phone. Maybe this weekend, he said, his words drifting away as he retreated to the bedroom. I sat on the edge of the bed after he fell asleep, watching him breathe, wondering how we'd gotten so far apart. I wanted to shake him, to demand answers, but fear held me back. Fear of what he might say, fear of what I already knew. On Saturday, as I made pancakes for breakfast, Marina swept in, her energy filling the room. She complimented my cooking, teased Lucia about her hair, and winked at Mateo, who giggled. Victor came in, smiling at her, and for a moment, I felt like an outsider in my own home. I tried to join in, but my laughter felt brittle, my smiles forced. After breakfast, I found Victor in the den, watching a soccer game. I stood in the doorway, gathering my courage. Victor, can we talk? I asked, my voice barely steady. He looked up, surprised. Now? The game's almost over. I almost let it go. Almost. But then Lucia's words came back to me, and Julia's, and something in me refused to be silent. It's important, I said softer. He nodded, but before I could speak, the phone rang. Tia Rosa, reminding us about lunch tomorrow. Victor answered, slipping easily into conversation, and my moment slipped away. That night, as I tucked Mateo into bed, he asked, "Mom, are you sad?" I hesitated, smoothing his hair. "A little," I said. Honesty easier in the darkness, but I'll be okay. He hugged me, his small arms tight around my neck. "You're the best mom," he whispered. "Better than anyone." His words warmed me, a small light in the gloom. I kissed his forehead, whispering a thank you, and promised myself that I would find the courage to ask Victor what he meant. Maybe at Tia Rosa's tomorrow, when we were all together, the truth would come out, one way or another. If you've ever felt unseen or unheard in your own life, know that you're not alone. Sometimes the hardest thing is finding the courage to ask the questions that matter, to seek the answers you deserve. If you want to follow the rest of my story and see what happens at that family lunch, please subscribe to my channel. I'd love to have you on this journey with me. As I turned out the lights that night, I felt a quiet resolve settle over me. Tomorrow, I would find out what Victor really meant. And maybe, just maybe, I would finally be seen. Dinner that evening felt different from the moment I heard the front door open and Marina's laughter come bouncing down the hallway, trailing the scent of her expensive perfume like a challenge in the air. I had been stirring the sauce for nearly 10 minutes, lost in my thoughts, and the sound of her voice snapped me back to the reality of our narrow kitchen, the chipped tiles, and the stack of plates waiting to be set on the table. The apartment was already warm from the stove, and yet, as my family gathered, Marina, Tia Rosa, cousins shuffling out of their shoes, I felt a chill, as if the windows had been thrown open in winter. My hands trembled slightly as I ladled soup. I told myself it was just the steam. Lucia hovered in the hallway, pretending to scroll on her phone but glancing at me for cues, as though she could sense the storm brewing beneath the surface. Mateo, still young enough to be oblivious, darted between the living room and the kitchen, asking if he could have bread with butter, if he could help set out the forks, if he could taste the sauce. I let him, grateful for something simple, something that didn't require me to measure my words. Victor was late coming home. That was nothing new, but tonight it gnawed at me. Every tick of the clock, every time a car passed on the street, I braced for the sound of his key in the lock. When it finally turned, he entered carrying a bag of groceries I hadn't asked for. Wine, a loaf of bread from the bakery on 19th, a wedge of cheese. He offered me a tired smile, his hair mussed, eyes darting behind me to where Marina's laughter still floated from the living room. I wanted to ask him right then about what he said last week. I wanted to pull him aside and demand clarity before anyone else could wedge themselves between us, but I didn't. Instead, I nodded, took the bag, and told him dinner was almost ready. We squeezed around the table, elbows brushing, plates overlapping. Tia Rosa sat at the head, as she always did, her hands folded over her cane, her gaze sharp and steady. Marina took the seat beside Victor, as was her habit, tossing her hair over her shoulder and complimenting the decor. "It's so cozy, Elena. You always make it look so homey." She lingered just a second too long on the word, and her eyes flashed to Victor, as if to reassure herself she had his attention. I felt my cheeks flush, but I forced a smile, ladling soup into her bowl. The conversation tiptoed over familiar ground at first: Mateo's school project, Lucia's upcoming dance, the weather, the neighbor's new dog. But beneath the surface, there was a current, tugging at each of us. I could see it in Lucia's fidgeting, the way she picked at her sleeve, in Victor's distracted nods as Marina recounted a story from work, her voice growing louder each time she caught him glancing at his phone. It didn't take long for the first jab to land. Marina, swirling her spoon, leaned forward and said, "You know, Victor, I remember when you used to do all the cooking before you met Elena. You made that amazing risotto, remember? I still can't get mine to taste the same." "Must be all this practice you're getting, Elena, though I suppose with enough time anyone can get it right." She laughed, bright and brittle, and the others joined in, some a little too quickly. I felt the air around me constrict. My hand tightened on my fork. I thought of the hours I'd spent planning this meal, the lists, the careful budgeting, the way I'd dusted the shelves and polished the silverware, hoping, childishly perhaps, that tonight would be different, that I could somehow stitch us back together with a perfect dinner. Instead, the seams felt looser than ever, threads pulled by hands that weren't mine. I looked at Victor, waiting for him to say something, to defend me, but he only smiled, embarrassed, and said, "Elena's always been the patient one." He didn't look at me. I tried to laugh too, but my voice caught. "Patience is a virtue, I guess," I managed, and Lucia shot me a look, half apology, half warning. The meal went on, the noise swelling and receding in waves. Tia Rosa told a story about her own mother, how she'd kept the family together through harder times. "A woman's strength is quiet," she said, her eyes finding mine and holding them. but it's the strongest thing there is. Marina nodded solemnly, but I could see her foot tapping under the table, impatient for her turn to speak. It was after the main course, when the table was cluttered with empty plates and half-full glasses, that Marina struck again. I was clearing dishes, Lucia and Matteo whispering in the corner, when Marina turned to Victor and said, "Honestly, I don't know how you do it, Elena. All this domestic stuff. I'd go crazy. I'm just not built for it, I suppose." She grinned, and the cousins laughed, but I could hear the edge beneath her words. I stood in the kitchen doorway, a stack of plates pressed to my chest, and for a moment I wanted to hurl them to the floor, to shatter the silence that had grown so heavy inside me. Instead, I set them down with shaking hands and said, "Some of us don't have a choice." My voice was too sharp, too brittle, but I couldn't take it back. The room stilled, everyone turning to me, surprise flickering across their faces. Even Victor. Marina arched an eyebrow. "Oh, come on, Elena. Don't be so sensitive. I'm only saying you're good at what you do. We all have our strengths." Her smile was tight, her eyes bright. Tia Rosa cleared her throat, the sound commanding. "Everyone contributes in their own way," she said, her gaze lingering on Marina before moving to me. "But don't forget to appreciate what's right in front of you." The silence stretched, awkward and raw. Victor looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time that evening. "Elena, are you okay?" he asked, his voice uncertain. Something inside me snapped. The weeks of doubt, the sting of his words, the exhaustion of invisible labor, all of it crashed over me in a wave. I set my napkin on the table and steadied my breath. "No, Victor, I'm not okay," I said, my voice trembling but clear. "I heard what you said last week, in the kitchen, when you thought I wasn't there. She's better than her. I've been thinking about it ever since. Who did you mean? Was it me? Was it Marina? Or was it just something you said without thinking, like so many things lately?" The room was silent except for the distant hum of the refrigerator. Marina's eyes widened, her mouth open in surprise. Lucia looked down, cheeks flushed. Matteo stared at his plate, still and small. Victor's expression shifted. Confusion, then guilt, then something softer. He ran a hand through his hair, glancing at the others before turning back to me. "Elena," he began, voice low, "I didn't realize you heard that." His words faltered, then found their footing. "I was talking to my cousin Daniel. He was asking about Marina, about how everyone always makes such a big deal over her, all her successes, how she always seems so perfect. And I said, she's better than her, but I didn't mean it the way you think." He paused, glancing at Marina, then back at me. "I meant you, Elena. I told him that you're better than all the rest. I said, Elena keeps everything together. She's the reason this family works. People don't see it, but I do. She's better than anyone gives her credit for. Better than her. Better than anyone." His voice cracked, barely audible. "I'm sorry I never said it to you. I'm sorry I let you think otherwise." The words hung in the air, fragile and shimmering. For a moment, no one moved. Then Lucia rose from her seat and came to my side, wrapping her arms around me. Matteo followed, pressing his face into my waist, his small hands clutching my skirt. Tears stung my eyes, and I blinked them back, the ache in my chest loosening just a little. I looked at Victor, really looked at him, as if seeing him for the first time in years. His face was open, vulnerable. He reached for my hand, and for the first time in a long while, I let him hold it. Marina looked away, her confidence faltering. Tia Rosa smiled, her eyes bright. "Sometimes," she said softly, "we need to hear what's said when we're not listening, and sometimes we need to say it out loud." The rest of the evening unfolded gently, the sharp edges softened. Conversation found safer topics. Laughter grew warmer, less forced. And as I cleared the table, Victor stood beside me, drying the dishes, his touch lingering on my shoulder. The ache of old wounds remained, but something new had taken root, a fragile hope, a sense that perhaps I was seen after all. Later, after everyone had gone, the apartment quiet but for the ticking of the kitchen clock, Victor found me on the couch. He sat beside me, folding me into his arms. "You are better," he whispered, "than all the rest. I don't say it enough. I'm sorry." I rested my head on his shoulder, letting the truth of his words settle. I thought of all the days I'd felt invisible, all the nights I'd wondered if my love, my work, my presence meant anything, and I realized that sometimes the recognition we crave comes not in grand gestures, but in the quiet confession, the courage to speak and to listen. Forgiveness, I learned, is not a single act, but a choice we make again and again. That night, I chose it for Victor, for myself, for all the ways we stumble and find our way back to one another. And as I drifted to sleep, I held the memory of his words close, letting them warm the corners of my heart that had grown cold. For the first time in a long while, I felt seen, and that, I decided, was enough. The morning after that family dinner felt different, like a room that's been rearranged in the night, the old familiar paths suddenly unfamiliar underfoot. I woke before the sun, slipping from Victor's side as quietly as I could, careful not to disturb his steady breathing. The apartment was silent, save for the soft whir of the refrigerator and the distant city noise filtering through the window. I padded into the kitchen, feeling the cold tile beneath my feet, and stood at the sink, my hands wrapped around a mug of coffee I couldn't quite taste. I could still hear Marina's laughter from the night before, sharp, echoing, and the way her words had lingered in the room, conjuring a discomfort that pressed against my chest like a stone. I replayed it all, over and over. Marina, with her easy confidence, her jokes that always seemed to land just on the edge of cruelty, Tia Rosa's raised eyebrow, the way everyone seemed to watch Victor when she spoke, as if waiting to see whose side he'd take. And then, that moment when Victor had looked down, his lips pressed tight, not meeting my eyes. The moment I had wanted, needed him to reach for my hand, to offer something, anything that would tell the room I mattered, but he hadn't. Through the window, the sky was a thin gray wash, and I felt as though I were standing at the edge of something I couldn't name. The ache in my chest was familiar, but sharper now, edged with humiliation and a longing I could no longer swallow down. I thought about Victor's words again. She's better than her. And I realized that whatever he had meant, the fact that I didn't know, couldn't even guess, was its own kind of answer. I moved through the apartment, straightening the cushions on the sofa, folding the blanket Mateo had left in a heap, collecting Lucia's scattered books, the messes of family life, evidence of all I'd given and all I'd risked. I stood for a long time at the kitchen table, my hand resting on the worn wood. The surface was scratched and stained, marks left by years of hurried breakfasts, spilled milk, homework battles, and late-night confessions, a history written in small, everyday scars. By the time Victor shuffled into the kitchen, hair tousled and eyes still soft with sleep, I had set out the breakfast things. He mumbled a "good morning," and I replied in kind, but our words skated over the surface, not touching anything deeper. Lucia came out next, her face pinched and tired. She flopped into a chair, not looking at either of us. Mateo soon followed, rubbing at his eyes, and for a moment the four of us sat in silence, the clink of spoons and the scrape of chairs the only sound. It would have been easier, perhaps, to let things continue as they were, to smooth the edges, to keep the peace. I could have let Victor's words fade into memory, swallowed my hurt, built walls around the softest parts of myself, but something had shifted in me, some quiet resolve that had been growing for years, fed by every overlooked kindness, every sacrifice made invisible by routine. I waited until the children were gone, Lucia off to meet a friend, Mateo absorbed in his cartoons. Victor had retreated to the bedroom, his laptop open on the bed, the dull blue glow of spreadsheets lighting his face. I hovered in the doorway, uncertain, feeling the weight of all the unspoken things between us. "Victor," I said, my voice trembling despite myself. He looked up, startled. "Yes?" I hesitated, searching his face for something. Gentleness, understanding, even defensiveness, anything but indifference. "I heard what you said the other night," I managed, my hands twisting in front of me. "In the kitchen. You said, 'she's better than her.' I need to know what you meant." He stared at me, silent. For a moment I thought he might deny it, or laugh it off, or worse, shrug and turn back to his work. But instead, he closed his laptop and set it aside, folding his hands carefully in his lap. "Elena," he began, his voice quiet. He stopped, searching for words. "I never meant to hurt you. I didn't even know you were there. I was talking to Tia Rosa about Marina and all her showiness. She was going on about how Marina is always put together, how she's successful, always the center of everything. And I said, maybe too quietly, that you're better than her, that you're the one who holds us together. You do so much, Elena, and I don't say it enough. I never have." I felt the room spin for a moment, relief and shame twisting together. I let out a breath I hadn't known I was holding, my shoulders sagging. "Then why?" I said, my voice catching. "Do you never say anything to me? Why do you let her make me feel so small? Why do I always feel like I'm the last person you see, even in our own home?" He looked down, rubbing his thumb along the edge of the comforter. "I don't know," he admitted. "I think I've always assumed you knew how much I depend on you, how much I love you. I'm not good at saying things the right way. Marina, she takes up all the space in a room, and I guess I let her, because it's easier than starting a fight. But I see you, Elena. I do. I never thought you needed to hear it. Tears stung my eyes, sudden and hot, not out of pain, but out of the ache of being seen. Finally, unmistakably, after so long. I sat down beside him, the mattress dipping beneath our weight. I do need to hear it, I whispered. Everyone does sometimes. He reached for my hand, his fingers tentative, and I let him. For a long moment we sat like that, the quiet between us no longer sharp, but gentle. He squeezed my hand, and I squeezed back. I want things to be different, I said. Not just with us, but with the whole family. I'm tired of pretending everything is fine. I want to feel like I belong in my own home. I want Lucia and Matteo to feel it too. He nodded, his eyes shining. Tell me what you need, Elena. I'll try. I promise. It was a beginning, uncertain, but real. The kind of promise that isn't made with grand gestures, but in the soft hours before noon, with sunlight slanting across the floor and the world outside just beginning to wake. We spent the rest of the morning together, talking in fits and starts, sometimes falling into old silences, but always coming back to one another. I told him about the loneliness I'd felt, the ways I'd tried to reach him, how invisible I sometimes became in the rush of family life. He listened, really listened, for what felt like the first time in years. Later, as the day stretched on, I found myself in the kitchen again, chopping vegetables for dinner. Lucia wandered in, hovering awkwardly by the counter. Mom, she said, her voice uncertain. Are you okay? I looked at her, really looked at her. The way she twisted her hair around her finger, the way her eyes darted away from mine. I remembered the way she'd confided in me, her own struggle to be seen and heard. I'm okay, I said, smiling softly. And you? How are you? She shrugged. I wish we were more like other families sometimes, like we all liked each other more. I set down the knife and reached for her, pulling her into a hug. She resisted at first, then melted against me, her arms tight around my waist. We're not like other families, Lucia, I said, stroking her hair. But we love each other, and we can get better. We can talk more. We can listen. She nodded, her face pressed against my shoulder. In that moment, I felt something loosen inside me, the knot of old hurts beginning to unwind. That evening, I set the table with care, lighting a candle even though it was just the four of us. Victor came in, carrying a loaf of bread he'd picked up on his way home, and Matteo followed, bouncing with excitement over some story he couldn't wait to share. We sat together, passing dishes, sharing small jokes, the warmth of the candlelight softening the edges of the room. Halfway through the meal, Victor cleared his throat. I want to say something, he began, his voice a little shaky. The children looked up, surprised. I know I'm not always the best at this, but I want you all to know how much I appreciate what your mom does for us, for all of us. We wouldn't be who we are without her, and I'm sorry if I haven't said it enough. The silence that followed was full, not empty, not tense, but full of possibility. Lucia reached for my hand under the table. Matteo grinned, crumbs on his chin. I felt myself smile, a real smile, the kind that starts in your chest and blooms outward. After dinner, we cleared the table together, laughter echoing in the kitchen. For the first time in a long while, I felt not just useful, but cherished. Not just necessary, but loved. In the days that followed, things didn't change overnight. Marina still visited, her voice still filling the apartment, her jokes sometimes landing a little too close to the bone. But I found I could meet her gaze now, my own voice steadier, my sense of worth no longer so fragile. Victor was different too, more present, more willing to step in when I needed him, more generous with his words and his affection. Lucia and Matteo, seeing the change in us, became softer with each other, more willing to share, to laugh, to forgive. I learned something in those slow, unfolding days. I learned that love isn't always loud, that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is to ask for what you need, to trust that you are worthy of being seen and heard. That forgiveness can be quiet, a hand held in the dark, a word spoken over dinner, a promise to try again. And I learned that we are all, in our own ways, better than we think we are, stronger, braver, more deserving of love and kindness than we sometimes dare to believe. So if you're listening to this and you've ever felt invisible, or less than, or unsure if what you do matters, know that you're not alone. Sometimes the smallest voices in a house carry the biggest weight. Sometimes all it takes is one honest conversation to begin to heal what's been broken. If this story touched your heart, or reminded you of your own family, I'd love for you to share your thoughts in the comments below. Let me know if you've ever struggled to feel seen or if you've found ways to bring your family closer together. If you enjoyed this moment of honesty and hope, please give this video a like. It helps more than you know. And if you want to hear more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new chapter. Thank you for letting me share my story with you. I hope it brought you a little comfort, a little courage, and a reminder that even in the ordinary rhythms of home, extraordinary things can happen, if only we're brave enough to listen and to speak. No matter how small you feel or how quiet your love, you matter. And that, I think, is the truest thing I can say.